Have you ever felt it? That weight in the middle of the night? Like the air itself is pressing down on you, thick and cold. Maybe it starts with a noise, something small, almost unnoticeable. A creak in the floorboards. A tap on the window. And you lie there, perfectly still, telling yourself it's nothing. It's just the wind. It's always just the wind, right? I used to think that too. I used to laugh it off, tell myself I was being silly. But there was this one night, a night I'll never forget. I woke up with this feeling I couldn't explain, like someone was standing at the foot of my bed, just watching. My chest felt heavy, and my breathing, it wasn't just mine I could hear. I told myself not to look. I told myself it was nothing. But then I heard it. A soft shuffle, like bare feet on the carpet. My hands started shaking, and I swear I felt something cold brush against my arm. You can tell yourself it's your imagination. You can convince yourself it's nothing. But sometimes, it isn't. Tonight, we're stepping into the places you were warned to stay away from. The places where shadows move when they shouldn't. Where the walls hold secrets no one dares to speak of. And the lies they've told you have kept you from knowing the truth. But the truth has a way of finding you. Whatever you think is hiding in the dark, it's closer than you realize. Our story takes us to Cold Hollow, Vermont, a forgotten corner of the world with a population of just under 300. It's the kind of town where time seems to stand still, where everyone knows everyone, and everyone knows to stay away from a place called Black Hollow. They say Black Hollow wasn't always like this. Once, it was home to a grand 19th century mansion. It belonged to the Winslow family, one of the wealthiest families in the state. But wealth doesn't protect you from the darkness. And in this case, the darkness didn't just creep in, it took over. Local legends tell of the Hollow Woman, a figure seen wandering the grounds of what's left of the mansion. They say she's searching for her children who were taken from her in a night of unspeakable horror over 150 years ago. Picture yourself standing at the edge of Black Hollow. The trees are ancient, their twisted branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. The air feels heavy, oppressive, as though it's pressing down on you, making it hard to breathe. There's a faint scent in the air, rotting wood, damp soil, and something metallic. Like rust. Or blood. And then, there's the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that makes your skin crawl. No birds. No insects. Just nothing. Except for the occasional snap of a branch that seems too deliberate. Too close. Black Hollow isn't just a legend. The stories are rooted in real events that have left their mark on this quiet town for over a century. In 1942, a group of campers set up their tents on the outskirts of Black Hollow. They were experienced hikers, familiar with the woods. But something happened that night, something no one can explain. The next morning, their campsite was discovered intact. The tents were zipped closed, their belongings untouched. But the campers? They were never seen again. There were no signs of a struggle. No tracks leading away. It was as if they had simply disappeared. And they weren't the last. In 1976, a local family made the mistake of exploring the ruins of the Winslow mansion. They told friends they wanted to see if the stories were true. But by the next morning, their car was still parked outside the forest, and they were gone. Some say they heard screams coming from the woods that night, screams that didn't sound human. Others claim they saw a woman in white standing at the edge of the forest, watching. Black Hollow has a way of pulling you in. It whispers to you. It lures you deeper and deeper, until you can't get out. In the spring of 1987, the Carter family moved to Cold Hollow. They were searching for a fresh start. Life in the city had worn them down, too many bills, too much noise. When they came across an ad for a secluded farmhouse just outside town, they thought they'd found their dream home. The price was almost too good to be true. But what they didn't know was why the land was so cheap. No one told them about the history of Black Hollow, or the stories whispered among the locals. And even if they had been warned, would they have believed it? For the first few weeks, everything seemed perfect. The air was fresh, the woods were peaceful, and for the first time in years, the Carters felt like they could breathe. But then, little things started happening. It began subtly. A flicker of the lights. Doors creaking open on their own. The sound of footsteps in the upstairs hallway, even when no one was upstairs. But the family brushed it off. Old houses make noises, they told themselves. It's just the wind. It's always just the wind, until it isn't. Mommy, there's a lady in the hallway. There's no one there, sweetheart. It's just your imagination. Emma insisted she wasn't imagining things. She told her parents about the woman, pale, with hollow eyes, watching her from the shadows. But they didn't believe her. Not yet. One night, Mr. Carter heard something strange. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving upstairs. But when he went to check, the second floor was empty. He told himself it was nothing. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. In the basement, Mr. Carter found something unexpected. A chest, locked and covered in dust, as though it hadn't been touched in decades. When he pried it open, he found a collection of photographs, and a journal. March 3, 1876. They've taken my children. The walls echo with their cries, but no one believes me. No one will help. The shadows, they're everywhere now. Watching. Waiting. The journal belonged to Eleanor Winslow, the woman who once lived in the mansion that stood on this land. Page after page, she pleaded for help, describing the strange occurrences that began after her children went missing. The whispers. The shadows. And the feeling that something was in the walls. But the most chilling entry came near the end. They've promised to bring my children back, if I stay. If I let them in. By the time the Carters realized the extent of what they were dealing with, it was too late. The whispers became screams. The shadows were no longer content to linger in the corners. And Emma, she wasn't herself anymore. It started with Emma. She began talking to someone who wasn't there. At first, the family thought it was an imaginary friend, something harmless. But then the laughter started. High-pitched. Hysterical. And completely unlike her. Mrs. Carter found her one night, sitting in the dark, staring at the corner of her room. When she asked Emma who she was talking to, Emma simply pointed and said, "The lady in the walls." That was the first time they saw her. The Hollow Woman. They thought she was just a story, until she wasn't. The footsteps turned into pounding. Doors slammed shut on their own. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as if the house itself was alive. And then, the screaming started. They tried to ignore it. Tried to tell themselves it wasn't real. But how do you ignore something that's standing right in front of you? They knew they had to leave. But the house, it wouldn't let them go so easily. She was everywhere. The windows. The mirrors. The walls. No matter where they turned, she was there, watching. They got into the car, but as soon as they started the engine, they heard it, a loud, bone-chilling slam on the roof. Something was on the car. They say that when you encounter something truly evil, you feel it in your bones. That night, the Carters felt it. The cold. The dread. The absolute certainty that they were being hunted. But escaping the house didn't mean escaping her. Because what the Carters didn't. The Carters thought they had escaped. They thought they were safe. But what they didn't know was that this wasn't the first time someone had tried to leave Black Hollow. And it wouldn't be the last. That night, as they tried to rest, something felt wrong. Emma woke up screaming, pointing at the corner of the room. She whispered, "She's here, she followed us." But when they looked, there was nothing there. Or so they thought. What the Carters didn't realize was that they had become part of something much larger. The Hollow Woman's curse was never bound to the house, it was bound to them. The Carters' story wasn't unique. For over a century, families who dared to step onto that cursed land met the same fate. Disappearances. Madness. Death. And always, the whispers of the Hollow Woman. She's in the walls. I can hear my children calling to me, but I know it's not them. It's her. She wants us all. The curse was tied to the land. But the land was tied to her. And once you've seen her, she will never let you go. 6 months later, the Carter family's car was found abandoned just outside Black Hollow. Their motel room was left undisturbed, as if they had simply vanished. The house stands empty now, but the locals say, it's waiting. And so the cycle begins again. The Hollow Woman's story was never fully understood. But one thing remains certain, she's still there. And she's still waiting. Dude, did you hear that? I swear I just saw something move in the corner. Some stories aren't meant to be discovered. Are you brave enough to hear the next one? So now, we leave you with one question. What do you think really happened to the Carter family? Were they victims of an ancient curse? Or was something darker, more sinister, hiding in Black Hollow all along? Have you ever felt something watching you when no one else was home? Heard a sound you couldn't explain? Maybe you've experienced something similar, but were too afraid to admit it. If you have, tell your story in the comments below. But be warned, sharing your experience might just invite her into your life. If this tale hasn't scared you off, join us next week, as we venture into the most haunted forest in the world. A place where entire search teams have vanished without a trace. A place where the trees whisper secrets, and the shadows consume those who dare to wander too far. But beware. The deeper you go, the harder it is to leave. Don't miss it.